With us now is Ellen Lapham. Ellen is president and co-founder of Centauri Corporation, the people who make the alphaSyntauri computer music system. Gary?
Ellen, what you have here seems to be somewhat different from Will's previous demonstration. How does what you're doing differ from the music instruction set?
Well, we're both in the music business, and we're both, in fact, using computers to do things that are musical. The key concept behind Centauri and what we do with music, simply music, is turn it into a musical instrument, a live musical instrument that you can play, you can listen to, you can transform sounds with, you can design sound, you can compose, and you can even learn keyboard. So what I actually can show you today is a program we call Simply Music. What I'm looking at on the screen here is a list of albums. Just as I have a 45 RPM record on my player, or 33, so I have a diskette. It goes into my disk drive, and now when I do a directory or catalog, I can see the list of songs I have previously recorded or someone else recorded loaded in. Why don't we listen to Jesu? Now, I played that piece in a couple of weeks ago, or someone else did, or perhaps you played it in yesterday. If you're learning to play keyboard, though, listening to music is not just what you need to do. You also need to see what's going on. So we're using the power of the computer now to give you a keyboard instrument that you can play and listen to, give you a video screen that shows you the music you're playing, and if you don't know how to read music, I will help you even further. I can load in a display of the keyboard itself, so that when I play back Jesu, I can see the parts that were played. Now that's a fairly complex piece. If I were learning to play music, if I'd never approached a musical instrument before or a computer music system, I might choose a more easy to learn song. For instance, Merrily. Now this is a pretty simple song, but it gets the point across that you too can learn to play keyboard with this fairly fancy technology just by
That sounds like segue music, Ellen, and I'm going to take advantage of that music to turn to John for a second. And John, one thing, of course, you're dealing with a computer so large we couldn't bring it here in the studio at your Stanford location. One thing you're involved in is music notation. I think you have an example of that in front of you. Show us what that is.
It's an extension of the same idea, and I guess demonstrates what one can do with an enormous amount of effort and over a large number of years. This is a program that was developed by Leland Smith, also on the music faculty, who over a 10-year period has refined the music manuscripting program, which allows one to use a standard printer plotter to output music in large scale, and then it's photo-reduced to become publishable quality. Well, the advantages are that his program automatically does part extraction, finds page turns, and of course eliminates all the problems of error making in music publishing. So it's a contribution of considerable importance, I think, in the music industry. The same basic ideas, but reaching a very high degree of refinement.
John, okay, you've brought with you an audio tape from your system at Stanford. We're going to play that tape right now, and if you can put on the headset so that you can hear it as we play it, and tell us what's going on in this audio tape.
Okay, this is an example of high-quality vocal synthesis using frequency modulation synthesis. It took me about 6 months to find the little cues to naturalness that seem to be so very often lacking in most electronic music synthesis. Now, having worked out this algorithm, we can play the next example and hear an extension of nature into a slightly unreal domain. For example, I've modeled now the human voice, but of a very, very large man. So it's deeper than any real human being could sing, as if he had a 6-foot chest, I guess, and a 3-foot neck. So the vocal resonances are greatly amplified because we have this independent control over the dimensions of sound in its abstract form. Now, one of the most important things about synthesis, and which will accrue to devices such as this and the things that little synthesis algorithm that Will was using, has to do with using the technology in such a way that we have a very clear sense of what's natural sounding. The next example demonstrates First, just a pure tone, which we'll hear, which is the pitch of what will become a sung vocal tone. Then, in a few seconds, we add all the harmonics or information that would be present in a real sung tone, but it only becomes natural at the moment we introduce the vibrato and this kind of wiggling in the pitch space, which is common to all natural sounds virtually. Once more, pure tone. Now harmonics, but not natural. And now it sounds natural, sounds vocal-like. So we can, by doing a vast amount of research and analysis in psychoacoustics and signal processing, we can extend to this miniaturization which we see a kind of quality of sound which I think will be a very great improvement.
Okay, John, we're going to move from Stanford now and go back across the country to Cambridge and MIT's Experimental Music Studio for a brief performance of a duet for piano and computer.
John, is the work that we're seeing in computer-generated music, is that still mostly in the laboratory, or is it being used in production?
Well, I think with the large-scale integration, we're seeing many of the techniques that have been developed in programs, etc., over the years in the context of a lab, finding application now in industry. There are, music synthesis algorithms that can be implemented in large-scale integrated circuits. We'll certainly more and more find use in devices of this sort, and organs and synthesizers and who knows what else.
Ellen, you mentioned earlier the concept of your floppy disk as a kind of record album with titles on it. We saw at the beginning of the program this kind of ROM cartridge. Do you see a kind of new form of music publishing in which you could buy floppy disks for a computer playback system?
Absolutely. In fact, my floppy disk is my personal diskette. I can self-publish, which means that now I'm a composer and a publisher all rolled up into one. That is, I have my Syntauri. I generate my own music, I save it on diskette, and I can send it off to friends across the country or around the world. So now every musician and every student becomes a publisher, and that means also that the teachers become publishers of their own musical material, and the professional composers can also publish for the audience of people who have the same instrument. So absolutely, yes, it is a new form of publishing, but a very personal one.
Very quickly, we have about a half a minute left. Do you find a resistance among professional musicians and composers, or they really love to get into this?
Well, I mean, at Stanford, virtually every composer who comes to study there not only learns about computer music, but becomes a rather exceptionally good programmer. So I think there's very little resistance, especially in the young generation. After all, people the age of is at will, the young man. Well, I mean, he's already beat the hurdle, you see. He already understands a great deal about programming because these things are in the environment, and that's good.
Okay, John Chowning of Stanford and Ellen Lapham of Syntauri, thanks so much for being here, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week again on the Computer Chronicles.